got Patrick off.
Yeah.
Do you know who sat at number 20 in the preseason AP
She's
poll
been on
last
this ever
year?
since I even brought this up.
Yeah, numbers are a very telling thing, and I do think that because Indiana was ranked number 20 last year, that does give Tennessee a much better chance of winning the national championship. I'm all about superstition, so if you're happy with that route, I'm happy with that route.
All right, that was a great answer. Exactly what I needed, Sam.
Honestly, why are we even playing the games if that's the case? We might as well just go ahead and crown the Tennessee Volunteers college football.
Lucky number 20.
But all biases aside, I thought that Tennessee being inside the top 25 was very generous, especially for all the question marks that this team has entering week 1 here coming up in the next couple of weeks. First off, before we get into any of the news that came out this past weekend, what are your initial thoughts on Tennessee being inside the top 25?
Yeah, I think if you're Tennessee, you're satisfied. I mean, anytime that you can start the year ranked, that keeps you from having to do a little bit more building, But I think by week 3, week 4, the preseason rankings are often null and void. Sure, it's going to give some teams, that quality win. I think that's what a lot of people are upset about when they look at this is, okay, why is you say Texas going to get a ranked win or why is somebody going to get a ranked win over Missouri at 25 when say a Big Ten school is not going to get a ranked win over an Illinois or somebody who beat a Tennessee in a bowl game this past season. Now, of course, these rosters are completely changed. They look completely different. The AP system is not the college football playoff system. We've seen that in recent years. I've been somebody who's gotten on the bandwagon in recent years that, hey, maybe we should do away with the preseason rankings. I know it's a lot of fun. I enjoy the rankings. So it's one of those things where I got to tug in both directions. Tug in both directions, tug in my heart. I love the preseason hype. I love, hey, we got a top 5 matchup in week 1 once again with Ohio State and Texas. That makes it fun.
Yeah.
But, I do think that most people overreact to the rankings. Tennessee, they're a program that's got the talent that they should be able to contend with anybody in the country inside of that top 20. I think that's probably when you look at, hey, what kind of skill does this team have? But as a whole, I feel like that's something that we shouldn't be too worried about until mid-season, and as long as you don't have 2-3+ losses, you're looking good. Doesn't matter your rankings.
That's right. Okay, Sam, I got to ask you about the quarterback battle. I know you probably don't have that much information, but it's starting to feel like just throughout the media that more people are leaning towards Faison Brandon. Is that kind of the vibes you're getting there out at fall camp, or what's your opinion here?
Yeah, I would say that's definitely the vibe right now is I just think a lot of people have been having that conversation. I know you're one. Sometimes I'm one where we want to analyze every throw.
Overanalyzing.
But I think the decision is going to be looked at in more of this is a program that we want to be a perennial playoff contender, and we have to look at it as not just the first 5 weeks of the 2026 season, who's going to win us the most games in that stretch, who's more ready to play right now, but who's going to be our quarterback this year, who's going to be our quarterback next year, and who's going to give us the best chance to win a college football playoff within that window. Because I think a lot of people right now, outside of Tennessee, don't think that this is a national championship contending team. There's not very many national championship contending teams across the country, and that's okay. But when you think, okay, which guy is going to be somebody that with all the returning talent and with that new recruitment class that's coming in, it's going to be pretty strong, who's going to be a guy that maybe next year we're looking at and we're going, man, Tennessee, should they be ranked inside the top 10 to start the year? Hey, I think if you make the right decision here, that's a conversation that we could be having 365 days from now.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And if you take a look at this offense, and I'll give you your credit here, because outside of the quarterback position, this looks like a very, very good offense. I know there are some question marks. We've talked about Mike Matthews. We've talked about Braylon Staley. Who is going to be that wide receiver 3? The potential is there for TK Keys. Do you still, and I think I asked you this last week, but in the last week, Do you get a sense that TK Keys may be able to step up into that wide receiver 3 role, especially after this scrimmage that we just had?
I do. I think he maybe has the highest upside in that group of Rodarius Jackson, Travis Smith Jr. The most upside, but I do think that maybe the Travis Smith Jr.'s and the Rodarius Jacksons might be ready to go week 1 through 4 in this season, heading into SEC play. They've gotten the most reps already. You know, they've taken the most hits when it comes to setting the outside block. TK Keys certainly has the upside in that mix, so I wouldn't be surprised if we saw him have a freshman season where we're going, okay, that's somebody who's going to be very good over the course of the next couple of years on Rocky Top. But I do think also when you have maybe your wide receiver 1 in Braylon Staley, who often is lined up in the slot, your wideouts are something that's going to be, you know, they're going to be shuffled a good bit. Yeah. So, you know, the Rodarius Jackson, the Travis Smith Jr.'s, they're a little bit longer. We'll probably see them shuffled out whenever we see a 3-4 receiver look. So I think a lot of these guys are going to get a lot of playing time in this system. But if you had to guess, you know, who's the highest upside of the wide receiver 3, I do think TK Keys is the guy just by the way that he's looked so far in fall camp and just the ceiling. Hey, get a game where he gets, 4 catches for 80 yards and a touchdown, and all of a sudden his confidence is through the roof. Now he believes he's the best football player on the field at any time. So we'll see what happens, but he's certainly got the personality that I think one good game could spark something dangerous out of him.
Before we flip to the defensive side, let's take a listen to Josh Heupel on the quarterbacks in this past scrimmage.
Yeah, today, couple communication, just handling some things early in the scrimmage that I think we can improve upon. I thought as the scrimmage went on, both played at a really high level, made some plays down the field, worked through their progressions. We worked 4-minute today, some things we can learn in that. All in all, a positive day. Both of those guys have had good training camps. In general, they've taken really good care of the football. They've continued to grow and mastering what we're doing and the control and command that you have to have at the quarterback position. But for both of them, just like our football team, there's a lot of growth to be ready to go play week 1. I like the growth from both of those guys. They've had really positive days, positive plays. They've all had one that they probably would do a little bit different. The fundamentals and technique continue to get better, understanding of what we're doing. Just want to see him continue to grow here over the next couple of weeks.
All right, Sam. So it feels like on the defensive side of the ball, there's a few more question marks, and we just came up with another injury in thru. Kind of talk about what type of difference that's going to make for this defense.
Yeah, no, Farouk, he's somebody that really stepped up last year, had a breakout sophomore campaign to where I believe he finished last season tied for 4th in tackles on the entire team at the safety position. That's somebody who we thought that this year is going to be a guy that was really one of the leaders on that group. Somebody who, Arion Carter's out, he's a guy who has been in the system. He's going to be a little more vocal in how things are going to go. And a guy who we've talked about when you got Jim Knowles, who runs a defensive system to where he really keys on the safeties. You want, your best players to be the ones back there making those plays. I'm, as someone who's a Tampa Bay Buccaneers fan, I think of Antoine Winfield, somebody who's going to be allowed the freedom to go make a play. He can roam a little bit and you give him that freedom to. And I think that's what we might have seen from Idris Farouk this season. Now we're going to have to wait a whole another year because he's out for this year. But there is some depth in that mix. When you bring in a guy, TJ Metcalf, who has played a lot of football, I think he's somebody who now they're going to have to rely on to be the leader in that group. And so, Dejon Lane, he's another guy who's going to be in the mix as well. So I do think now, we got to see what this depth looks like, but you certainly don't want to see one of your defensive leaders out before you ever play a snap of football this year. I mean, now you're getting to the point to where you're already thinking as a whole, Tennessee football, hey, maybe we're 1 year away and a couple more injuries in the mix. And then you're getting to the point to where you're going, man, like that 2026 season, like, they're a talented bunch, but, a few more injuries, and we're looking at, oh, yeah, well, this was an injury year. Hopefully they're all coming back healthy next year. But we're not going to get to that unless we have to get to that point. But right now, you hate what you see for Idris Farouk, a great young man who, is a leader in the system, was very excited to play with Jim Knowles' system. So a big hit for the Vols, but next man up, we'll see what that looks like moving forward.
And you bring up a term in depth that is something that we've been talking about a lot here in the last couple of weeks. Before the injury to Idris Farouk, we were talking about some depth pieces that were going down with injuries. You brought up Arian Carter. He's going to have to miss the first 2 games. Now that we're starting to throw a couple starters here in the mix that have suffered injuries, do you think that this is just too many blows to this defensive depth here for Jim Knowles to honestly be a defense that's going to contend and help out a presumably first-year quarterback, presuming that Faison Brandon does end up winning the job? I mean, I keep on keying in that Georgia Tech game, but all of a sudden that game is starting to look murkier by the minute with all of these injuries.
Yeah, no, I mean, obviously the thing about football is you always want to see best on best in any circumstance, whether it's a SEC, college football as a whole, NFL football. That's what you want to see. But over the course of the year, it's a dangerous game. It's a violent game. And oftentimes when it gets to October, November, a lot of teams look a lot different than they did in week 1, and you can't help that. But I do think that when we're now in this age of, we're paying for players to come in and transfer in, and, maybe that guy doesn't end up being someone who's an everyday starter. This roster should be talented enough that the plug and play is still a good enough product that each night you're competing with the best teams in the SEC. So I do think it's going to test their depth. You certainly don't want a couple more to really get into, okay, we're having to shift players around and stuff like that. I don't think we're anywhere near that point to where we're having to shift maybe a speedy linebacker to go put him back in the star position or anything like that. But I do think last year we saw a couple injuries in the linebacker unit, which ended up saying, man, we got some really talented freshman linebackers who now this year we're looking at to be some of the go-to guys. So it's opportunities for some guys to step in, and we might have thought that, Idris Farouk was going to be a household name this season, but it could be a new guy stepping up the mix to be that person the Vols count on this season.
Sam, I'll ask you this because I feel like Patrick and I have had this conversation a few times on the show. With the injuries we're seeing on the defense and Arian Carter not playing the first 2 games, I think they'll be just fine with Furman. But then when you talk about going to Atlanta for that Georgia Tech game, do you have any concerns, or do you feel like Tennessee is going to be able to take care of that one?
At this point, I haven't seen as much of Georgia Tech to really have a true opinion on that. If you look at just, hey, what kind of team does Georgia Tech field in the past? Like, yeah, that's always going to be a scary matchup on the road. Early on in the year, your young quarterback maybe hasn't found their stride yet. I do think it's certainly a game that we've talked about before. I think Auburn is a game in the mix where if you lose that one, things could snowball. If you lose to Georgia Tech, things could snowball really, really quickly.
Right.
It's no longer the Haynes King and seasoned group that I would be very scared if this was last year's Georgia Tech team.
Yeah,
it's a lot of unproven guys. So very similar to Tennessee. This is a group that could exceed expectations or one that could live around or just below expectations. Georgia Tech is similar. We don't know as much about them. A lot of transfers, a lot of new guys in the system this year. But I do think as a whole, that's a dangerous one. Couple more injuries. We're really maybe sweating that one out. But I do think right now you head into week 1, you're fine. Week 2, you have every bit of expectation that with this roster, no matter who the quarterback is, you should win that game and be 2-0 heading into your SEC opener against Texas. So I would not stress out just yet. If things look shaky against Furman, hey, maybe re-ask me that question and we'll see what happens. But I do think you're going to see a team that looks utterly dominant in week 1. You're going to feel a little more confident heading into week 2. It's not going to be, a 30-point blowout, but I do think that Tennessee does have the talent and the depth right now to be able to go on the road and win a game like that.